Do I have everybody's attention now?
Coming at number 10, WWF Raw. The first try for Xbox to join the WWE gaming universe was not a good first step. A game that looked really good graphically had almost no depth to it. The gameplay was bad and it did not feel like it belonged in this generation of wrestling video games. Matches felt like they never flowed well and the momentum meter felt broken. The career mode was also very limited, allowing you to only go after certain belts, and its creator character was lackluster at best. The one other positive besides graphics for the game is that I believe it was the first game to truly let you detail your entrances. But beyond that, the game is a shallow attempt. Coming in at number 9, WrestleMania 21. Another game that graphically looked amazing quickly revealed itself to be all glitz and little substance. The player models were outstanding in the game, but the new revamped engine made the game run pretty horribly. A bunch of bugs and glitches plagued the game throughout. The game had a large number of matches, and if you can get by that chugging feeling, you could probably get a decent match out of it that would somewhat be fun. But even with that said, the hit detection was clumsy, its creator wrestler was shallow, and all the talk about online was pointless since the online feature was broken. It's one of those games that you notice has a lot of potential, but it never quite hits it. Coming in at number 8, WrestleMania 2000. Let it be known that this is the Game Boy Color version of the Nintendo 64 hit, but this one was a misfire on almost every level. The game is filled with very limited animation for its 16 wrestlers, and had only about 5 modes to fight in. Its soundtrack was limited and it became very dull and repetitive quickly. Now I fully understand that a lot of things get left on the cutting room floor when you port them over to handhelds, but the night and day between this version and the 64 version is so much that I had to make room for it on this list. It being a port does not answer why it has a sluggish feel, reused player models, and every wrestler fighting the same. People are still paying for this game, so someone should have given a shit when they were porting it over. It's a game that feels like a total cash grab. Coming in at number 7, WWF In Your House. The first PlayStation wrestling game turned out to be one of the worst on the console. Suffering from a limited roster of only 10 wrestlers and almost no modes, it's hard to find much to like in this game. I guess the gameplay was okay, but the sound effects for the game were strange and always felt out of place. So much so that it was better to have the game muted through a match. The game was made by those who created Mortal Kombat, and it was WWE's attempt at turning their wrestling games into beat-em-up fighting games. The end product felt odd, clunky, and almost unplayable, like you knew that they were trying, but they just couldn't get anything right. Coming in at number 6, Royal Rumble. The Royal Rumble video game did something that to this day you don't see. Having up to 9 characters on a screen at the same time, it's something that not even this generation of wrestling fans got to experience. The awesome part about it is that it gave off a real chaotic Royal Rumble feeling, but the game's problem is that that's all it brought to the fight. It had a total of 2 modes that consisted of Royal Rumble and one-on-one. A roster that consisted of 22 wrestlers, even though the WWE Royal Rumble consisted of 30 for it to work. So if you haven't guessed it yet, that meant that when you played the Royal Rumble, eliminated wrestlers would show back up multiple times. The game also didn't play very well. It felt very clunky and sluggish, which if the gameplay didn't work, it made the little things that it did well completely forgotten easily. Coming in at number 5, WrestleMania, the arcade game. WWE's first attempt at trying to cash in on a video game trend that had nothing to do with wrestling failed miserably. Sure, Mortal Kombat was awesome and WWE was awesome at the time, and mixing them might have sounded good on paper. But that's why you have a team of people that make a ton of money to try to figure out what works and what doesn't. And this obviously didn't work. The game's biggest problem is that it doesn't feel like a wrestling game. There's no real grapples or moves in the game that resemble anything of a wrestling move. Instead, what you got was a lot of kicking and punching with odd combos in between. Now, if the game would have been a basic fighting game, maybe things could have been forgiven, but instead they made an odd Mortal Kombat game featuring WWE wrestlers that had an odd NBA Jam moments feel to it at times. None of it felt right and none of it felt enjoyable, making you wonder what they were thinking when they made it. Coming in at number 4, WWE Crush Hour. So someone over at WWE thought that the brand needed a horrible Twisted Metal ripoff. Wrestlers were forced by Vince McMahon to take part in a racing game to the death, with different cars representing the wrestler that was driving them. One positive about the game is that the wrestlers' cars all played kind of differently, so that's something that most games on this list didn't accomplish. The game also had a pretty good roster of 30 superstars represented. The biggest problem with the game is that it was just an odd concept to see. Why someone would think that the WWE brand should be attached to this baffles everyone that's played this game. It was bland and had horrible gameplay with no real inspiration behind it. As you're playing it, you just feel like you're playing a very bad version of Twisted Metal. But the biggest offense of it all is that nothing about this would appeal to a wrestling fan. Wrestling fans want wrestling in their video games, so when you don't give us that, we're gonna be a very upset bunch. It's no surprise to anyone that we haven't really seen any video games like this since this one was released. Coming in at number 3, WrestleMania Steel Cage Challenge. The first game to ever feature a steel cage had one job: for it to be fun. We never saw a steel cage in a wrestling game before, so let's just say many people were extremely excited about it. Now, we did get a steel cage in the game, but somehow somebody forgot to put the fun back in there. What we got was a boring disappointment that added no real replay value to it. Every wrestler fought and moved the same, making choosing one just based on the color scheme that you see on the screen. And to make matters worse, it only gave you 10 wrestlers total, so you got to pick from 10 wrestlers and just kind of kick and punch your way to victory. We get that this is the first game to give us a cage match, but that gimmick should not have been an excuse to give us such a lackluster, empty game. Coming in at number 2, WWF Betrayal. Has anyone out there actually even played Betrayal? It's got to be one of the weirdest games on this list. It's a side-scroller based on the Corporate Ministry storyline. You got to play as Triple H, The Rock, The Undertaker, or Stone Cold, and your job was to retrieve Stephanie McMahon, and if you got her, you got a title shot. Beyond that bit of WWE feel to it, the game was a boring, generic fighting side-scrolling game. Think of it like a really bad version of Streets of Rage or Double Dragon. It's hard to even consider this an actual WWF video game, since there is never really a ring you fight in. Throughout the game, you're beating up referees and ring announcers, fighting mini bosses. It doesn't feel like a wrestling game. I honestly feel that if the game didn't have the WWF title to it, and it was just a basic side-scrolling game, it would have been a decent game, and nobody would have thought about putting it on a list like this. But they decided to put the WWF title on it, making it seem like it has something to do with wrestling. Coming in at number 1, WWE Aftershock. A game so bad that most don't even acknowledge that it exists. It was a video game made for the N-Gage, which I'm sure you have never heard of. Therefore, it was a game that should have never existed in the first place. The game featured a whopping 11-man roster with no creative feature. If that wasn't enough, it had no story mode and very little modes beyond one-on-one. Every wrestler felt the same, moved the same, wrestled the same. There was nothing special about the game. The entrance music felt like it was composed by someone that didn't actually know anything about the WWE. Instead, they just decided to give the wrestlers random music. When a handheld system is not meant to have great graphics and you still stand out as the worst looking game on it, that's a major problem. Everything about Aftershock felt weird. Everything about Aftershock felt like it wasn't a wrestling game. The grabbing was awkward, the punching was awkward, the movement was awkward, everything was just awkward. Most of the games on this list, you could probably play for about 10 to 15 minutes. WWE Aftershock, after 1 or 2 minutes, you can't even play it anymore. You have to put it down. It's a game that looks and plays so badly that I'm sure you're having a hard time even looking at the screen right now. Look how bad it looks. Just look at it. It's awful.